Hey guys, I'll be doing a series where I read books and you can listen on if you want. I will be giving updates on new chapters every night, and this is a book we're starting off with. Fable by Adrienne. Start with chapter 1. That bastard was leaving me again. Between the trees I could see Coy and the others kicking up sand as they pushed off the beach. The skiff slid into the water and I ran faster, my bare feet finding their way over twisted tree roots and buried rock on the path. I came through the thicket just in time to see the smirk on Coy's lips as the sail dropped open. "Coy!" I shouted, but if he could hear me over the sound of the waves, he didn't show it. I tore down the slope until I reached the foam left by a retreating wave and planted one foot in the wet sand before I jumped, my feet kicking as I flew over the swell toward the stern. I caught the stay with one hand and crashed into the side of the hole, my legs dragging in the water as the skiff took off. No one offered me a hand as I pulled myself up and over the side with a curse under my breath. "Nice jump, Fable." Coy took hold of the tiller, his gaze on the horizon as he steered us toward the south reef. "Didn't know you were coming." I racked my hair into a knot on top of my head, glaring at him. It was the third time in a week that he tried to leave me behind when the dredgers went out to dive. If Speck weren't drunk half the time, I'd pay him for a ride to the reef instead of Coy, but I needed a boat I could count on. The sail snapped overhead as the wind caught it, jerking the skiff forward, and I found a place to sit between two leather-skinned dredgers. Coy held out a hand to me. "Copper." I looked over his head to the barrier islands where the masts of trading ships tipped and swayed in the rough wind. The Marigold wasn't there yet, but by sunrise, she would be. I pulled the coin from my purse and with gritted teeth, dropped it into Coy's palm. By now, he made so much copper off me that I practically paid for half of his skiff. We picked up speed and the water rushed past, turning from the pale turquoise of the shadows to a deep blue as we pulled farther from the shore. I leaned back as the boat heeled, tilting so I could let my hand skim the surface. The sun sat in the center of the sky and we had a few hours before the tide started to turn. It was more than enough time to fill my bag with pyre for trade. I tightened the belt around my waist, checking each of my tools: mallet, chisels, picks, trowel, eyeglass. Most of the dredgers had moved on from the East Reef months ago, but my gut had told me that there was more pyrite hiding in those waters, and I'd been right. After weeks of diving the stretch alone, I found the cache beneath a picked-over shelf, and the stones had filled my purse with coin. The wind whipped around me as I stood, pulling strands of my dark auburn hair around my face. I took hold of the mast and leaned over the side, my eyes mapping the waters that raced beneath us. Not yet. "When are you going to tell us what you found down there, Fable?" Coy's hand tightened on the tiller, his eyes meeting mine. They were dark as the blackest nights on the island when the storms veiled the moon and the stars in the sky. The others looked up at me silently, waiting for my answer. I'd seen them watching me more carefully on the docks, and I'd heard the whispers on the beach. After weeks of light hauls on the reef, the dredgers were going restless, and that was never good. But I hadn't expected Coy to be the one to finally ask me outright. I shrugged. "Abalone." He laughed, shaking his head. "Abalone," he repeated. He was younger than most of the dredgers on Javal, his toasted skin wrinkled and spotted white from the long days in the sun, but he'd earned his place among them tenfold by stealing enough coin to buy the skiff and start his own ferrying trade. "That's right," I said. The humor left his eyes when they found mine again, and I clenched my teeth, trying not to let the twitch at the corner of my mouth show. It had been 4 years since the day I was dumped on the blazing hot beach and left to fend for myself, forced to scrape holes in exchange for rotten fish when I was starving, and beaten for diving in another dredger's claimed territory again and again. I'd seen my fair share of violence on Javal, but I'd managed to keep out of Coy's way until now. Catching his notice was a very dangerous place to be. I stepped up onto the stern, letting the same wicked smile bleed into my lips that had been painted on his back at the beach. He was a bastard, but so was I, and letting him see how scared of him I was would only make me easier prey. I'd had to find a way to stay alive on Javal, and I'd lose a hand before I let anyone take the chance to get off. Not when I was so close. I let go of the mast, and the skiff flew out from under my feet as I fell back into the water. My weight crashed into the sea, the crystalline bubbles rippling up around me as I floated towards the surface and kicked to warm myself against the chill. The edge of the East Reef touched the current, making the water colder on this side of the island. It was one of the reasons I knew there was more pyre down here than what had already been dredged. Coy's boat shot away from me, the full sail curved against the cloudless sky. When it disappeared behind the barrier islands, I cut back in the opposite direction toward the shore. I swam with my face in the water so I could measure the reef below. The pinks, oranges, and greens of the coral caught the sunlight like pages of the atlas that used to lay unrolled across my father's desk. A bright yellow sea fin with a broken frond was my mark. I came up, shaking my belt again as I dragged the air in slowly, filling my chest and letting it out at the same pace, the way my mother taught me. My lungs stretched and then squeezed as they emptied in a familiar push between my ribs. And I quickened my draw, sucking it in and pushing it out in spurts until I took one last full breath in and dove. My ears popped as I carved through the water with my arms, headed for the brilliant bright colors glowing on the seafloor. The pressure hugged in around my body, and I let myself sink deeper when I could feel the surface trying to pull me back up. A school of red-striped tangs pushed past, folding around me in a swarm as I came down. The infinite blue reached out in every direction as my feet landed lightly on a ridge of green coral reaching up like twisted fingers. I gripped the rock's edge above it, scaling down to the breach. I had found the pyre when I was scouring the reef for a crab to pay the old man at the docks to repair my eyeglass. The soft hum of the gemstone had found my bones in the silence, and after 3 straight days of trying to uncover it, I caught a lucky break. I'd kicked off an outcropping to surface when a shelf broke off, revealing a crooked line of basalt pocketed with the telltale white clusters I knew so well that could only mean one thing: pyre. I'd made more coin off the traders on the Marigold in the last 3 months with this stash than I had in the last 2 years altogether. Another few weeks and I'd never have to dive these reefs again. My feet settled on a ledge and I pressed a hand to the rock, feeling down the curve of the ridges. The soft vibration of the gemstone hissed beneath my fingers, like the stretched renaissance of metal striking metal. My mother had taught me that too, how to listen to the gems. Deep in the hull of larks, she'd set them up into my hands one at a time, whispering as the crew slept in the hammock strung from the bulkhead. "Do you hear that? Do you feel it?" I pulled the tools from my belt and fit the chisel into the deepest groove before I hit it with the mallet, crumbling the surface slowly. Judging from the shape of the corner, there was a sizable piece of pyre beneath it, maybe 4 coppers worth. The shine of the sunlight on silver scales glittered above me as more fish came down to feed, and I looked up, squinting against the glare. Floating in the murky distance down in the reef, a body drifted beneath the surface, the remains of a dredger who crossed someone or didn't repay a debt. His feet had been changed to an enormous barnacle-covered rock, left for the sea's creatures to pick the flesh from his bones. It wasn't the first time I'd seen the sentence carried out, and if I wasn't careful, I'd meet the same end. The last of my air burned in my chest, my arms and legs growing colder, and I hit the chisel one more time. The rough, white crust cracked, and I smiled, letting a few bubbles escape my lips. As a jagged piece of the rock broke free, I reached up to touch the glassy red pyre peeking out at me like a bloodshot eye. When the edges of the black began to push in around my vision, I kicked off the rock, swimming for the surface as my legs screamed for air. The fish scattered like a rainbow, breaking into pieces around me, and I came up and out of the water, gasping. The clouds were pulling into thin strands overhead, but the darkening blue on the horizon caught my eye. I'd noticed a tinge of a storm on the wind that morning. If it kept the Marigold from reaching the barrier islands by sunup, I'd have to hold on to the pyre longer than was safe. I had only so many hiding places, and with every day that passed, more eyes were watching me. I floated on my back, letting the sun touch as much of my skin as possible to warm me. It was already sinking toward the slanted ridge that reached over Javal, and it would take at least 6 or 7 more dives to get the pyre free. I needed to be at the other end of the reef by the time Koi came back for me, if he came back for me. 3 or 4 more weeks, and I'd have enough coin to barter for a passage across the Narrows to find Saint and make him keep his promise. I'd only been 14 years old when he dumped me on the infamous island of Thieves, and I spent every day scraping together the coin I needed to go find him. After 4 years, I wonder if he'd ever recognize me when I finally showed up knocking at his door. If he'd ever remember what he said to me as he carved into my arm with the tip of his whalebone knife. My father wasn't the forgetting kind, neither was I. That's the end of chapter 1. Sorry for my bad reading, but check in for chapter 2.